Today, Rashid's reading a picture book. Rashid really likes looking at the pictures because he knows that the pictures tell him a lot about what's going on in the story. He can learn a lot about the characters, the settings, and the different events that are happening in the story just by looking at the pictures. This story that Rashid's reading has very nice illustrations. An illustration is a picture that somebody drew or painted or colored in. Some stories have photographs instead of illustrations. A photograph is a picture that's taken with a camera. You can learn a lot from the story just by looking at the photographs as well. Let me show you what I mean. So here we have an anchor chart. And at the top of the anchor chart it says, "A picture is worth 1,000 words." And that's absolutely true because we can learn so much just by looking at the pictures in a story. Right here it says, "I can use the pictures in a story to describe characters, settings, and events." And that's what we're going to do right now. I've got a picture here of Rashid. This is an illustration, and an illustration is a picture that somebody draws. So somebody drew a nice picture of Rashid, so it's an illustration. And if we look at this illustration, we could learn a lot about Rashid. We could say, Rashid is happy. And if we look back at the illustration here, we could see that Rashid is smiling. If he's smiling, that must mean that he's happy. That's something that we learned about Rashid just by looking at the illustration. Just by seeing him smiling there, we know that Rashid is happy. I've got another illustration down here. Here's one that I drew. It's not very good, but you could see what's happening here. We've got a snowman, and we've got some snowflakes falling down, and we're going to describe the setting just by looking at that illustration. So if there's a snowman and there's snow coming down, I know something about the setting. I know that it is cold outside. It only snows, and we can only build a snowman when it's cold outside. So that's something I know about the setting just by looking at the picture. Just by looking at that illustration, I know that it is cold outside. So now Rashid's reading a story on his computer, and he's paying close attention to the pictures. Let's take a look at the picture that he's looking at. So what I've got here is I've got a close-up picture of the story that Rashid was reading on his computer. And it's from one of the Pete the Cat books. And I've never read this story before, but what I'm going to do is, just by looking at this picture, I'm going to see if I could figure out what's going on. Now, if you want to pause the video really quickly and make your own guess about what's happening here, go ahead and do that for a few seconds. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm looking at this picture, and I'm going to draw some circles on this picture to show you what I'm looking at. I can see a bunch of cats right here. There's our friend Pete right there. And we've got another one of his friends right here. So it looks like we got Pete and a bunch of his friends around this table. They're all holding forks. I'm going to circle one of the forks. They're all holding forks. And then here in the middle of the table, we've got this huge pile of food that's way too big for just one of them to eat. And so you know what? Just by looking at this picture, I can tell they're about to have lunch together. They've all got forks, so you really only hold a fork when you're about to eat something. There's a big pile of food on the table that it looks like there's enough there for all of them to share. So just by looking at this picture, I think they're about to have lunch together. What do you think is happening in the picture? Here I have a photograph of Rashid's grandfather, whose name is also Rashid. And in this photograph, I see he's sitting by a typewriter. Now, a typewriter is something that they used to use a very, very long time ago to write stuff down. But back before they had computers, if they wanted to type something, they had to use a typewriter. Now, I'm also going to zoom in here on what his grandfather's typing. And it says, "The Bamboo Thief" by Rashid Panda. So I see that he's typing that, and he's sitting by a typewriter. So you know what? I think Rashid's grandpa, just by looking at this picture, I think he is maybe writing a book. That sounds like an interesting name for a book, and he's sitting by a typewriter, so looking at that picture, I think he's writing a book. And that's something that I'm guessing about Rashid's grandpa, who is kind of like a character in a story. I'm making a guess about him just by looking at the picture. I see he's sitting by a typewriter. I see that he's typing something that says The Bamboo Thief. So maybe he's writing a book or a story. I can also make a guess about the setting, about when this picture was taken. I think this picture was taken a long time ago. We've got a typewriter, which nobody really uses anymore. They haven't used those for a very long time. I see a really old looking phone sitting next to the typewriter, and I see a really old looking hat sitting on the other side of the typewriter. So this picture must have been taken a very long time ago. So that's something else I'm learning just by looking at a picture. There aren't really any words to tell me what's happening, but I'm figuring out a lot of it just by looking at these photographs that I have. So next time you're reading a story, give it a try. See what you could figure out about what's going on in the story just by looking at the pictures. Pictures like this one of Rashid and Steve. What do you know about Rashid and Steve just by looking at this picture?